The search results loaded quickly, filling the screen with links, images, and snippets of information about Jordan Bennett. Alex leaned back on her couch, her coffee growing cold as she clicked through the pages. The first result was for Bennett Blooms, Jordan's floral design business. The website was sleek but understated, featuring a gallery of stunning arrangements, cascading bouquets, intricate table centerpieces, and elaborate floral arches. Each photo was accompanied by a brief, heartfelt description of the inspiration behind the design. "Romance meets simplicity," one caption read. Inspired by the bride's love of wildflowers and her groom's rural hometown. Alex scrolled, intrigued. It was clear that Jordan's work wasn't just a job, it was an art form. Next, she stumbled across a local magazine article titled "The Man Behind the Flowers, Jordan Bennett Talks Love, Loss, and Creativity." Her heart thudded as she clicked it. The interview revealed glimpses of Jordan's life. He'd grown up in a small town, raised by his grandmother after losing his parents in a car accident at the age of 7. The floral shop had been his sanctuary, a place where he learned not only the craft of arranging flowers but also the stories they could tell. One quote stood out. "Flowers are more than decorations. They're symbols of connection, of love, of resilience. Every arrangement I create is a reflection of that." Alex felt a pang in her chest. Jordan's sincerity, his quiet passion, seemed so at odds with her cynical outlook. The next day, Alex tried to bury herself in her work, but her thoughts kept drifting back to Jordan. She wrote half a draft for her latest blog post, an unremarkable piece about the predictability of wedding vows, before deleting it in frustration. Her phone buzzed. A text from Melissa, her best friend and occasional partner in crime. "Still crashing weddings this weekend? Or taking a sabbatical to reflect on the meaning of life?" Alex smirked, typing back. "Weddings stop for no one." But as she hit send, a flicker of doubt surfaced. Was she still enjoying this? Or was it becoming a hollow routine? Saturday rolled around, and Alex found herself walking into another venue, this one a historic library turned event space. Tall bookshelves framed the room, their leather-bound volumes adding an air of sophistication. The wedding was tasteful and understated, muted tones, soft lighting, and a quartet playing classical music in the corner. Alex made her way toward the back, scanning the crowd for familiar faces. She spotted Jordan near the entrance, his hands full with a vibrant bouquet of dahlias and roses. He was talking to an older woman who was nodding appreciatively at his work. Alex felt a jolt of something, nerves? Anticipation, as she considered approaching him. But before she could decide, Jordan caught her eye. His face lit up with a mix of surprise and amusement. Well, he said, walking over. "I was starting to think you might not show up this time." Alex raised an eyebrow. "And miss the chance to see your latest masterpiece?" "Never." Jordan laughed. "You're consistent, I'll give you that." They fell into step together, weaving through the guests. "You know," Jordan said, glancing at her, "I'm starting to think you enjoy these weddings for more than just the free food." "Careful," Alex teased. "You're getting dangerously close to sounding like you know me." "Maybe I do," he replied, his voice soft but teasing. "Or maybe I'm just really good at reading people." For once, Alex didn't have a snappy comeback. The ceremony was beautiful but brief, the vows heartfelt without being overly saccharine. Alex stood near the back, observing quietly. Jordan was nearby, adjusting a floral arrangement on the podium. She watched him work, marveling at his focus and precision. It wasn't just the flowers, it was the way he moved, the way he seemed so genuinely invested in creating something meaningful. When the reception began, Alex found herself lingering near Jordan again. "So," she said, her voice light, "what's the deal with you and flowers? Is it just business, or is there a secret romantic hiding under all that professionalism?" Jordan chuckled, leaning against a pillar. "Why does everyone assume florists are hopeless romantics?" "Because flowers are the universal symbol of love," Alex quipped. "Fair point," Jordan said, smiling. But for me, it's more about stories than romance. Every wedding, every couple, they have a story. Flowers are just a way to bring that to life. Alex tilted her head. What about your story? What's it like being the guy behind the scenes? Jordan hesitated, his smile fading slightly. It's complicated, he said, his tone quieter. I've seen a lot of weddings. Some of them are beautiful, and some of them feel like they're just for show. But the ones that matter, the real ones, they make it worth it. Alex nodded, feeling a pang of guilt. She wasn't here for the stories or the beauty, at least, not in the way Jordan meant. Not exactly the answer you were expecting? He asked, his gaze searching hers. No, she admitted. But it's a good one. For a moment, they stood in silence, the buzz of the reception fading into the background. Alex felt something shift, an unspoken connection that unsettled her more than she cared to admit. Later that night, as Alex left the venue and stepped into the cool night air, she pulled out her phone. Instead of opening her blog app, she opened a blank note and began typing. Some weddings are more than just pageantry. They're about connection. About meaning. About finding beauty in the small things. She paused, her fingers hovering over the screen. Jordan Bennett was changing the way she saw weddings, and maybe even herself. Alex sat in her favorite cafe the next morning, a steaming cappuccino in front of her and her laptop open to a blank document. The usual buzz of inspiration she got from her wedding escapades was missing. Instead, all she could think about was Jordan's quiet conviction, the way he saw meaning in the smallest details. She'd spent years tearing down the facade of weddings, exposing their absurdities and overindulgence, and now, what? She was writing fluff pieces about connection? Get a grip, she muttered to herself, shaking her head. Her blog had a following because it was unapologetically cynical. If she started waxing poetic about romance, her readers would riot. But as she typed, her words felt forced, her usual sharp wit dulled. Later that week, Alex found herself preparing for another wedding. She selected a sleek black dress and pinned up her hair, but her heart wasn't in it. Her thoughts kept drifting to Jordan and their last conversation. The venue was a grand museum, its high ceilings and marble floors lending the event an air of timeless elegance. The couple had clearly spared no expense, string quartets, champagne fountains, and an entire exhibit hall transformed into a dance floor. As Alex slipped through the crowd, her practiced smile firmly in place, she spotted Jordan near a towering floral display in the entryway. Of course, he's here, she thought, her pulse quickening. Jordan noticed her almost immediately, his expression shifting from surprise to delight. Well, if it isn't the wedding connoisseur, he said, walking over. You're making a habit of showing up at my gigs. Or maybe you're making a habit of showing up at mine, Alex shot back, her tone playful. Jordan laughed, his eyes crinkling at the corners. Touché. So, who are you this time? Old family friend? College roommate? Cousin twice removed, Alex quipped without missing a beat. You know how it is, big families, blurry connections. Jordan nodded, his smile amused but knowing. Right. Very believable. Alex felt a flicker of unease. Did he suspect the truth? Throughout the night, Alex tried to keep her distance, mingling with guests and jotting notes on her phone. But every time she looked up, it seemed like Jordan was nearby. During the dinner speeches, he caught her eye and tilted his head toward the floral arrangements at their table. What do you think? He whispered as she leaned closer. Classic, she said. Safe choice, but beautifully done. You've outdone yourself. Safe, he repeated, pretending to be offended. I'll have you know those arrangements are a modern twist on a 17th century design. Alex stifled a laugh. I'm sure the bride and groom are deeply moved by the historical significance. Jordan grinned. Hey, you're the critic. I just make things pretty. Their banter felt effortless, almost too natural, and Alex couldn't shake the feeling that she was enjoying herself more than she should. As the night wore on, Alex found herself on the terrace, the city skyline glittering in the distance. She leaned against the railing, savoring the cool breeze and the quiet. "You disappear a lot," Jordan's voice said behind her. Alex turned, startled to see him standing there, his jacket slung over his shoulder. "Or maybe you're just everywhere," she countered, smiling. Jordan stepped closer, leaning against the railing beside her. "So, Alex, tell me, what's your real story?" The question hung in the air, heavier this time. Alex glanced at him, her defenses wavering. "What makes you think there's a real story?" she asked lightly. "Call it a hunch," Jordan said, his gaze steady. "You're too sharp, too observant to just be another guest blending into the crowd. You're different." Alex's breath hitched. She'd spent years perfecting the art of being invisible, of slipping in and out of weddings without leaving a trace. But Jordan had noticed her. "I could say the same about you," she said, deflecting. "You're not exactly the typical wedding vendor." Jordan chuckled. "I'll take that as a compliment. But you didn't answer my question." Alex hesitated, torn between the instinct to deflect and the sudden urge to tell him the truth. "I write," she said finally, choosing her words carefully. "About weddings. It's sort of a hobby." Jordan raised an eyebrow. "So you're a wedding journalist?" "Something like that," Alex said, her cheeks flushing. "Huh," Jordan said, his tone thoughtful. "That explains a lot. But it doesn't explain why you're always watching. Like you're not really part of it." Alex felt a pang of vulnerability. He saw too much, and it scared her. "Maybe I just like being an observer," she said, forcing a casual tone. Jordan studied her for a moment, his gaze soft but probing. "Fair enough. But if you ever want to stop observing and start living, you know where to find me." He smiled, then walked away, leaving Alex alone with her thoughts. That night, back at her apartment, Alex stared at her laptop. She opened her blog, scrolled through her drafts, and hovered over the latest entry. It was sharp, snarky, and exactly what her readers expected. But as she reread it, the words felt empty. She closed the laptop without posting, her mind swirling with questions she wasn't ready to answer. Jordan's parting words echoed in her head, "If you ever want to stop observing and start living." For the first time, Alex wondered if her role as a wedding crasher was less about critique, and more about hiding from something she wasn't ready to face. Alex avoided weddings the following weekend, a rare decision for her. She told herself it wasn't because of Jordan's words, but deep down, she knew they had unsettled her. Instead of crashing another ceremony, she wandered aimlessly around the city, her mind replaying his parting shot, "If you ever want to stop observing and start living." What did he know about her life? About why she kept her distance? He was just a florist, a perceptive one, sure, but still. By Sunday evening, she was restless. Her fingers hovered over her keyboard, tempted to pour her conflicted thoughts into a blog post. But for the first time in years, she couldn't find the words. Monday brought an email from Melissa. Subject: "What is this?" "Alex, I swear, if you've gone soft on me." Alex frowned and clicked the attached link. It was a screenshot from her blog drafts, one she hadn't published yet. Weddings aren't just about vows and dresses. They're about moments, small, fleeting, but deeply human. Like the way the groom's voice breaks during his vows, or the quiet pride in a grandmother's smile. These are the things worth noticing. Alex groaned. She'd written that during a sleepless night, thinking no one would ever see it. How had Melissa? Another email arrived. "Oops. Forgot to mention I logged in to check your stats." "You're welcome. Also, who are you? This is so sincere. Call me now." Alex sighed, her phone already buzzing. "Okay, spill," Melissa said as soon as Alex picked up. "What's going on? This doesn't sound like you." "I don't know," Alex admitted, flopping onto her couch. I've just been rethinking things. Rethinking what? Weddings? Or life in general? Maybe both, Alex said hesitantly. Melissa was quiet for a moment. Does this have anything to do with that florist guy you mentioned? What's his name, Jordan? Alex's stomach flipped. Why would it have anything to do with him? Because you haven't shut up about him since you met. And because I know you, Alex. You don't let people get to you. But he clearly has. Alex groaned. I don't even know him. Not really. He's just different. Different how? I don't know. He actually believes in this stuff. Weddings, love, all of it. And somehow, it doesn't come off as fake or cheesy. It's genuine. Melissa's laugh was warm but teasing. Sounds like someone's got a little crush. It's not a crush, Alex said quickly. Sure, Melissa said, dragging the word out. Listen, all I'm saying is, maybe this guy is exactly what you need. Someone to challenge your cynicism. Alex rolled her eyes but didn't argue. By Friday, Alex was back on her usual routine, scanning wedding announcements and picking her next event. She wasn't ready to unpack her feelings about Jordan, but she also couldn't seem to avoid him. That weekend's wedding took place in a botanical garden, its paths lined with twinkling fairy lights and fragrant blooms. Alex wandered through the lush greenery, jotting down notes on her phone. She spotted Jordan almost immediately, his hands full of peonies as he adjusted a cascading arrangement near the ceremony arch. She considered slipping away before he noticed her, but he turned and caught her gaze, smiling. You're predictable, he said, walking over. Says the guy who's at every wedding, Alex shot back. Jordan chuckled, wiping his hands on a cloth. Touché. So, what's the verdict? Do the flowers meet your high standards? They're stunning, Alex admitted, surprising herself with her honesty. Wow, Jordan said, feigning shock. A compliment from Alex the critic. I'll treasure this moment. She rolled her eyes, but a smile tugged at her lips. During the ceremony, Alex found herself watching Jordan more than the couple. He stood near the edge of the crowd, his eyes soft as he observed the proceedings. When the bride walked down the aisle, Jordan's expression shifted, a quiet pride lighting his face. It struck Alex that he wasn't just there to do a job, he genuinely cared about the moments he helped create. As the vows were exchanged, Alex's usual skepticism felt out of place. There was an authenticity to this wedding, a warmth she couldn't dismiss. Later, at the reception, Alex and Jordan ended up at the same table. So, Jordan said, pouring them both a glass of wine, do you ever just enjoy these things? Excuse me? Alex said, raising an eyebrow. You're always watching, taking notes, analyzing. But do you ever just let yourself be part of it? Alex hesitated. I guess I don't see the point. I'm not here for that. And why is that? Alex faltered. She could feel his gaze, steady and unrelenting, and for the first time, she didn't have a clever deflection ready. Because it's easier to stay on the outside, she admitted softly. Jordan didn't look surprised. Instead, he smiled, a gentle, understanding curve of his lips. Maybe. But sometimes the best things happen when you let yourself be vulnerable. The word hung between them, vulnerable. Alex hated the idea of it, and yet, coming from Jordan, it didn't sound so terrible. For the rest of the night, Alex couldn't shake the feeling that Jordan was right. Back at home, Alex stared at her blog again. She opened a new draft and began to type. There's something terrifying about being part of the moment instead of just observing it. But maybe that's what makes it worth it. Her fingers hovered over the publish button. For the first time, she wondered what her readers might think of the truth. Alex hit save draft instead of publish, her chest tight with uncertainty. The words she'd written felt raw, too personal, like exposing a part of herself she'd worked hard to keep hidden. Her phone buzzed, snapping her out of her thoughts. Jordan, guess what? You owe me feedback on tonight's flowers. I expect a full review by tomorrow morning. Alex smirked, her unease easing slightly. Alex, bold of you to assume I care that much. Jordan, oh, you care. Admit it. Alex, fine. They were nice. Can I go to bed now? Jordan, nice. That's the kind of glowing praise I live for. Alex, don't push your luck. She tossed her phone onto the couch, shaking her head with a small smile. Jordan had a way of sneaking past her defenses without even trying. The next weekend, Alex chose a wedding on the outskirts of the city, hoping the unfamiliar venue would provide some much-needed distance from her tangled thoughts. It was a rustic affair at a sprawling vineyard, complete with twinkling lights and rows of grapevines stretching into the horizon. But as Alex strolled through the venue, her heart sank. Jordan was there, setting up an elegant floral arch that framed the vineyard's sunset perfectly. You've got to be kidding me, she muttered under her breath. Jordan spotted her almost immediately, his face lighting up with an infuriatingly warm smile. Alex, he called out, walking over. You're starting to feel less like a wedding crasher and more like a groupie. Don't flatter yourself, Alex retorted, crossing her arms. You're not the reason I'm here. Jordan grinned, clearly enjoying her irritation. Sure you're not stalking me? Alex rolled her eyes. This city isn't big enough for your ego, Bennett. The ceremony was picturesque, the kind of event that would have fueled one of Alex's biting blog posts in the past. But as she watched Jordan fuss over the floral details, adjusting them to perfection, she found herself distracted. It wasn't just his work, it was his presence. Calm, grounded, and completely at ease in a setting that usually made Alex feel like an outsider. By the time the reception began, Alex had somehow ended up at Jordan's side again. So, he said, handing her a glass of champagne, when do I get to read one of these famous blog posts of yours? Alex nearly choked on her drink. What? Don't play coy, Jordan said, leaning against a nearby table. I've seen you taking notes. You're clearly writing something. Alex's mind raced. She wasn't ready for him to know the truth, not when her entire brand was built on tearing down the very thing he seemed to hold sacred. It's nothing serious, she said with a casual shrug. Just observations. Observations about weddings? Sure. Jordan raised an eyebrow, his expression skeptical but amused. Well, when you're ready to share, let me know. I'm curious. Alex gave a noncommittal hum, hoping he'd drop the subject. As the night wore on, Alex found herself on the dance floor, pulled there by an overly enthusiastic guest who mistook her for a cousin. She was about to make her escape when Jordan appeared, his tie loosened and a mischievous grin on his face. Mind if I cut in? He asked, holding out his hand. Alex hesitated. Do you even dance? Not well, he admitted. But I'm willing to embarrass myself if it means you'll stay a little longer. Alex rolled her eyes but took his hand. The music was slow, the kind of romantic ballad Alex usually mocked, but Jordan didn't seem to care. He led her awkwardly but earnestly, his hand warm against hers. You're terrible at this, Alex said, unable to hide her smile. Terrible but charming, Jordan replied. For once, Alex didn't have a snarky comeback. After the wedding, Alex sat in her car, her phone clutched in her hand. Jordan's words from earlier lingered in her mind, when you're ready to share, let me know. She opened her blog, scrolling through her unpublished drafts. Her finger hovered over the post she'd written the previous week, the one about vulnerability and connection. With a deep breath, she hit publish. Almost instantly, comments started pouring in. Wow, this is a different side of you, Alex. I love it. This hit me right in the feels. Are you okay? Wait, do you actually believe in love now? Alex laughed softly, her chest feeling lighter than it had in weeks. The next day, as Alex sipped her morning coffee, her phone buzzed. Jordan, just read your latest post. Beautifully written. Told you I was curious. Her heart skipped a beat. Alex, you read my blog. Jordan, of course. I had to figure out what you were scribbling in your notes all the time. Alex, and? Jordan, and maybe you're not as much of a cynic as you think you are. Alex stared at the message, a slow smile spreading across her face. Maybe Jordan was right. Maybe she wasn't. Alex wasn't sure what compelled her, but the next weekend, she found herself reaching out to Jordan instead of her usual routine of scanning wedding announcements. Alex, got any weddings this weekend, or do you take breaks like normal people? Jordan, depends. Are you coming as cousin twice removed again? Alex, that joke is tired. Pick a new one. Jordan, fine. You can be mysterious +1. There's an outdoor wedding tomorrow. You in? Alex, why not? When Saturday rolled around, Alex arrived at the venue, a sprawling lakeside estate surrounded by towering pines. It was beautiful, understated, and the kind of wedding that would have been perfect for one of her snarky posts. Yet, as she stepped out of her car, she realized she wasn't here for the usual reasons. She was here because of Jordan. Jordan spotted her as she walked toward the ceremony space, dressed in a flowing emerald green dress that she had to admit looked good on her. Alex, he called, waving her over. He was wearing his usual wedding attire, a crisp shirt with the sleeves rolled up, a tie loosened just enough to make him look approachable. Am I allowed behind the scenes this time? She asked as she approached. Only because you're with me, Jordan said, grinning. He led her to the reception area, where he'd created a stunning display of wildflowers woven into trellises that framed the lake. Alex couldn't help but admire his work. Okay, I'll admit it, she said. You're ridiculously good at this. High praise from the infamous Alex the critic, Jordan teased. Careful, you might start sounding like a fan. Alex rolled her eyes but didn't argue. During the ceremony, Alex found herself seated next to Jordan, who had taken a rare break to enjoy the event. Do you ever get tired of weddings? She asked quietly as the couple exchanged vows. Not really, Jordan said. Every one is different. And there's always a moment that reminds me why I do this. Like what? Jordan thought for a moment. Like when the groom starts crying, even though he swore he wouldn't. Or when the bride sees the flowers for the first time and can't stop smiling. It's the little things. Alex studied him, her usual skepticism faltering. You really believe in all this, don't you? Is it that hard to believe? Maybe, Alex admitted. It just feels idealistic. Jordan smiled. Maybe it is. But what's wrong with a little idealism? Alex didn't have an answer. The reception was lively, with guests laughing and dancing under strings of lights that twinkled like stars. Alex lingered at the edge of the dance floor, observing as usual. Let me guess, Jordan said, appearing beside her. You're composing your next blog post in your head. Maybe, Alex said, smirking. You know, Jordan said, his tone teasing, one of these days, you're going to have to stop watching and actually join in. Bold of you to assume I don't dance, Alex shot back. Prove it. Before she could protest, Jordan took her hand and led her onto the dance floor. The music was upbeat, the kind of song that encouraged wild, carefree movements. Alex tried to resist at first, but Jordan's ridiculous dancing was contagious. You're terrible, she said, laughing as he spun her around clumsily. But I'm having fun, he said, grinning. And so are you. Alex couldn't deny it. For once, she wasn't just observing, she was part of the moment. As the song ended, they found themselves standing closer than she'd realized, his hand lingering on hers. You're full of surprises, Alex, Jordan said softly. So are you, she replied, her heart racing for reasons she didn't want to examine too closely. After the wedding, as they walked back to their cars, Jordan turned to her. You know, I was serious about wanting to read more of your work. Alex hesitated. I'm not sure you'd like all of it. Try me. She sighed. Fine. I'll send you something. But don't say I didn't warn you. Deal, Jordan said, smiling. As Alex drove home, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was shifting, not just in her view of weddings, but in her view of herself. For years, she'd built a wall around her heart, convincing herself that staying on the outside was safer. But Jordan was quietly, persistently, showing her that sometimes the best stories come from stepping inside.